The air we breathe today is thick with a specific kind of digital anxiety, a relentless pressure to be everything to everyone at all times. We are told that the Renaissance man is back, but this modern iteration is a hollowed-out version of the original, built on the shifting sands of multitasking and superficiality rather than the bedrock of deep, focused inquiry. You wake up and check a dozen notifications, each one demanding a different slice of your personality, a different skill set, and a different cognitive load. By breakfast, you have already fragmented your soul into tiny, manageable pieces, convincing yourself that this frantic movement is the same thing as progress. It is a psychological trap designed to make you feel like a titan of industry while you are actually just spinning your wheels in a vacuum of your own making. We celebrate the hustle and the grind as if the sheer volume of our activity is a metric for the quality of our character, yet we ignore the growing void where mastery used to live. Society has successfully sold us the illusion that breadth is equivalent to depth, leading us to believe that knowing a little bit about 1,000 things is superior to knowing everything about one. This chapter is the disruption of that comfortable lie, the moment we stop pretending that being busy is the same thing as being successful. We are living in an era of manufactured competence where we are encouraged to jump from one shiny new skill to the next, never pausing long enough to let the roots of our understanding take hold in the fertile soil of persistence. You feel the weight of it every single evening when you close your eyes, that nagging suspicion that despite all the tabs open in your browser and all the projects on your desk, you haven't actually moved an inch closer to the person you were meant to become. The illusion of the modern polymath is perhaps the most dangerous myth of our generation because it masquerades as ambition. We look at the titans of history and misinterpret their genius as a broad stroke of luck, failing to see the decades of monastic silence and singular obsession that preceded their public triumph. In reality, modern society has weaponized our desire for growth against us, creating a culture of constant context switching that destroys the very cognitive pathways required for high-level problem solving. When you jump between learning a new language, starting a side business, and mastering a complex hobby all in the same week, you aren't becoming more capable, you are becoming more deluded. Each transition costs you more than just time, it costs you the momentum required to break through the plateau of mediocrity. We have become a civilization of starters, fueled by the cheap dopamine of the first few hours of a new endeavor, only to abandon the work when it demands the uncomfortable sacrifice of our undivided attention. This fragmentation creates a profound sense of confusion, a mental fog where your various identities compete for dominance, leaving you with a resume that is a mile wide and only an inch deep. You are a jack of all trades, not by choice, but by a lack of discipline, a victim of a world that profits from your distraction. We are conditioned to fear the narrow path because it feels like a prison, yet we fail to realize that the wide path is actually a labyrinth with no exit. The more you try to do, the less you actually achieve, yet the machine keeps telling you to add just one more thing to your plate. It is time to recognize that this feeling of being overwhelmed is not a sign of your productivity, but a symptom of your systemic failure to choose. Attention is the only true currency of mastery, yet we spend it like we have an infinite supply, throwing it away on trivialities while our greatest potential remains starved of focus. In a world that thrives on the commodification of your gaze, the ability to look at one thing for a decade is a superpower that most people have completely forgotten how to use. Divided focus is not just a productivity killer, it is a destroyer of long-term growth and a poison to the creative spirit. When your mind is scattered across 20 different objectives, you never reach the state of flow where true innovation resides. You remain on the surface, skimming the waves of information but never diving into the silent depths where the real treasure is hidden. This divided state of being feels productive because your calendar is full, but it is a silent thief that keeps you average in every single domain you touch. It prevents you from developing the specialized intuition that separates the expert from the amateur. Think of your energy as a beam of light. When it is diffused, it barely warms the surface, but when it is focused through a magnifying glass, it has the power to burn through steel. Most people are living their lives as a soft, ambient glow, wonderingly why they cannot make a dent in the world. They are terrified of missing out, so they try to catch every passing breeze, never realizing that a ship with 10 sails pointed in 10 different directions will only ever sit still in the water. The tension you feel between your desire for greatness and your daily reality of triviality is the sound of your potential being ground down into dust by the gears of indecision. You are sacrificing your future on the altar of the immediate, trading your legacy for the temporary comfort of feeling like you are keeping up with everyone else around you. The silent tragedy of the multi-hyphenate life is that it feels remarkably like success until the moment it suddenly doesn't. You can spend years building a diverse portfolio of mediocre accomplishments, receiving polite applause from people who are just as distracted as you are, only to realize at midlife that you have no core. There is a specific kind of hollow exhaustion that comes from being pretty good at many things but indispensable in none. This mindset keeps you in a state of perpetual adolescence, where you can always pivot to something new the moment the current task requires true grit or faces the threat of failure. It is a defense mechanism disguised as a lifestyle choice. By never committing to one path, you protect yourself from the possibility of being judged on your ultimate effort, but you also disqualify yourself from the rewards of ultimate achievement. The high-end audiobook of your life is currently playing a chaotic symphony of unrelated notes, a cacophony that lacks a central melody to hold the listener's heart. We avoid the depth because depth is terrifying. It requires us to face our limitations and sit with the boredom of repetitive practice. It demands that we say no to 1,000 good ideas so that we can say yes to one great one. Modern culture views this kind of pruning as a loss, a limitation of freedom, but in the realm of mastery, limitation is the only thing that creates liberty. The person who knows exactly what they are for is the only person who can truly move the world, while the jack of all trades is merely moved by it. We have been trained to find comfort in the variety, but there is a hidden, cold reality to this variety. It is the primary reason you are still waiting for your life to truly begin. You are busy, yes, but you are not building anything that will outlast your own frantic heartbeat. There is a hidden advantage in simplicity that the world desperately wants you to ignore because simplicity cannot be easily sold back to you in the form of a subscription service or a new gadget. Choosing to do less is an act of rebellion against a system that relies on your constant, scattered consumption. It feels uncomfortable at first, like a sudden silence in a room that has been loud for years. It feels limiting to pick one direction and walk it until your feet bleed, but this is the only way to reach the horizon that others only dream of seeing. Mastery requires a level of ruthlessness that society finds distasteful. It requires you to be boring to others so that you can be brilliant to yourself. When you stop trying to do everything at once, you stop being a passenger in the collective madness of the modern age and start becoming the architect of your own destiny. The shift from fragmentation to focus is not a tactical move, it is a spiritual evolution. It is the moment you decide that you would rather be a master of one meaningful craft than a servant to 100 meaningless ones. This transition requires a total recalibration of your values, a shedding of the ego that craves the validation of being perceived as busy. You must embrace the quiet, the repetitive, and the narrow. You must learn to love the constraints, for it is within those constraints that the most profound human expressions are forged. Most people will never do this because they cannot stand the initial feeling of being left behind while others continue their frantic, shallow racing. But the race they are running has no finish line, and the prize they are seeking does not exist. You are being invited to step off that track and enter a different arena entirely, one where the rules are written by those who have the courage to choose. Take a long, hard look at the path you are currently walking and ask yourself if it is leading toward a mountain peak or just circling the base in a series of picturesque but ultimately futile loops. If you died tomorrow, would you leave behind a legacy of significant impact, or merely a collection of half-finished projects and abandoned dreams? The world does not need more people who are passably good at a dozen different things. It needs individuals who have the courage to dive so deep into their calling that they return with truths that change the way we see reality. Your current direction, characterized by its frantic variety and its lack of true commitment, is a slow suicide of the soul. You are trading your unique genius for a generic brand of competence that is easily replaced by the next person with a faster internet connection or a newer degree. The discomfort you feel right now, the tightening in your chest as you realize how much time you have wasted chasing the phantom of doing it all, is the only honest thing you have felt in a long time. It is a call to action from the part of you that still remembers what it feels like to be truly great. You can continue to be a jack of all trades, a master of none, and live a life of quiet, multifaceted desperation, or you can embrace the terrifying beauty of the narrow path. The choice is yours, but remember that every day you spend trying to do everything is another day you spend becoming nothing. You are currently standing at a crossroads, and the direction you take today will determine whether your life is a masterpiece of focused intent or a cluttered attic of wasted potential. Are you ready to let go of the illusion of more to finally achieve the reality of something? The door to mastery is narrow, and you cannot carry your distractions through it. What will you leave behind? The human brain is a biological marvel of concentration, yet it is utterly ill-equipped for the modern demand of simultaneous ambition. When we embark on a journey toward 5 different goals, we believe we are multiplying our output, but in reality, we are merely dividing our capacity for excellence until it vanishes entirely. This is the hidden architecture of failure, the belief that our willpower is an infinite reservoir that can be siphoned off into a dozen different directions without losing its pressure. In truth, every new objective you add to your life introduces a hidden tax on your cognitive sovereignty. This is not a matter of talent or intelligence, it is a matter of the fundamental laws of energy conservation. Imagine a spotlight trying to illuminate an entire stadium by flickering rapidly between thousands of individual seats. It may create a sense of movement, but it never provides enough sustained light for anyone to actually see. This is the psychological state of the modern striper, a constant oscillation between tasks that feels like progress but is actually a form of stationary vibration. We fail not because we are incapable of reaching the summit, but because we are trying to climb 6 different mountains at the same time, unaware that the path to the top requires a total commitment of the spirit. The more goals you have, the less likely you are to achieve any of them, because the friction of switching between them consumes the very fuel required for the journey. You are essentially burning your house down to keep yourself warm, trading your long-term legacy for the temporary warmth of feeling productive. We must confront the harsh reality that our perceived ambition is often just a sophisticated way of avoiding the terrifying depth of a single, difficult challenge. The primary mechanism of this systemic collapse is decision fatigue, a silent predator that feasts on the distracted mind. Every time you pivot from your creative project to your fitness goals, and then to your professional aspirations, you are forcing your brain to undergo an expensive reboot. This emotional and cognitive switching creates invisible failure patterns that most people misinterpret as a lack of discipline. It is not that you are weak, it is that you have exhausted your executive function before the real work even begins. By mid-afternoon, the person pursuing multiple goals is operating on mental fumes, making poor choices that sabotage their own progress. They find themselves scrolling through social media or indulging in distractions not because they are lazy, but because the sheer weight of their fragmented agenda has broken their resolve. This is the paradox of choice applied to personal development. The more paths you leave open, the harder it becomes to walk any of them with conviction. We tell ourselves that we are multitasking our way to greatness, but in reality, we are just engaging in scattered execution. This leads to a profound lack of consistency, as the emotional labor of constantly reorienting oneself to different objectives drains the joy out of the process. You start each day with a sense of dread rather than a sense of purpose, because your mind is already anticipating the chaotic juggle ahead. This fragmentation ensures that you never reach the state of profound competence where work becomes effortless and results become exponential. Instead, you remain trapped in the grueling initial phase of every endeavor, where the resistance is highest and the rewards are lowest, because you never stay long enough to break through the barrier of the mundane. Motivation is often misunderstood as a constant flame, but it is actually a reactive force that feeds on the perception of progress. When you divide your energy across too many directions, the visible progress in any single area becomes so infinitesimal that it fails to trigger the dopamine response required to sustain your effort. This is why so many people start with incredible intensity only to find their enthusiasm evaporating within weeks. They are working hard, but because that hard work is spread thin like a layer of mist, they cannot see the needle moving. This creates a psychological feedback loop of despair. You feel like you are doing everything right, yet you are still standing in the same place. In response, the brain seeks a new source of novelty, leading to the familiar cycle of switching paths. You abandon the weight loss goal to focus on learning code, then drop the code to start a podcast, convinced each time that the problem was the goal itself rather than your approach to it. This is the tragedy of the jack of all trades. They are perpetually beginning, forever intoxicated by the promise of the first mile but never experiencing the transformation of the marathon. Real success is a game of momentum, and momentum requires a singular, sustained vector. By constantly changing your trajectory, you ensure that your total velocity remains zero. You are essentially a high-performance engine that is being constantly shifted into different gears before it can gain any real speed. This results in a life of unfinished symphonies and half-built monuments, a collection of starts that never led to a single finish. You must realize that the feeling of losing interest is not a sign to move on. It is a sign that your focus is too wide to produce the heat necessary for a breakthrough. Real-world failure patterns are rarely dramatic. They are the result of 1,000 small compromises born from a divided heart. You see this in the person who buys all the equipment for a new hobby, spends 3 nights obsessed with it, and then lets it gather dust as soon as the first genuine obstacle appears. They tell themselves they have diverse interests, but the truth is they are addicted to the shallow ease of being a beginner. Once the honeymoon phase ends and the path requires sustained, boring, repetitive focus, the distracted mind recoils and searches for a new target. This is not ambition, it is a sophisticated form of procrastination. By keeping your options open, you protect yourself from the ego-bruising reality of true failure in a single domain. If you try to do everything and fail, you can blame the workload. If you try to do one thing and fail, you have to blame yourself. This fear of inadequacy often drives the desire to be a polymath, acting as a shield against the vulnerability of total commitment. We jump between identities because it allows us to avoid the painful shedding of our former selves that mastery requires. You cannot become a master while clinging to every other version of who you might be. This cycle of starting strong and fading out becomes a personality trait over time, eroding your self-trust and making it harder to believe in your own potential with every subsequent attempt. The lack of depth in your work is a direct reflection of the lack of depth in your attention. You are living a life of horizontal expansion when what you truly crave is vertical growth. The world does not reward the number of things you have started, it only rewards the things you have had the grit to finish. Until you acknowledge that your scattered focus is a defensive mechanism, you will remain a perpetual amateur. Consider the biological reality of skill acquisition, where neural pathways are forged through the relentless repetition of a specific task. When you pursue multiple goals, you are essentially trying to build 10 different roads at the same time with only one paving machine. None of the roads ever become drivable because you are constantly moving the equipment from one site to another, leaving a trail of gravel and unfulfilled promises behind you. Failure in this context is not a lack of ability, it is a logistical failure of your own making. You have the intellect, the passion, and the strength to reach the highest levels of achievement, but you are wasting those resources on the overhead of transition. Every time you switch focus, you lose the subtle nuances and the subconscious processing that occur when you stay immersed in a single problem. Mastery is found in the margins, in the final 5% of effort that most people never reach because they have already moved on to the next shiny object. This is why the expert seems to operate with a level of grace that the amateur can never replicate. They have stayed in the fire long enough to be transformed by it. By contrast, the multi-goal pursuer is always slightly out of sync, always catching up, and always feeling a step behind. This creates a state of chronic stress that further impairs your ability to perform at a high level. You are not just failing at your goals, you are failing yourself by refusing to honor your own potential with the gift of your undivided attention. It is a harsh truth to swallow, but your current strategy is a recipe for a life of quiet regret. You are trading your greatness for a pile of mediocrity, and the only person who can stop the bleeding is the one who chose to start it in the first place. As we move forward, you must prepare yourself for a truth that runs counter to everything modern culture has taught you: the path to more is found through the doorway of less. We have been conditioned to believe that addition is the only way to grow, that more skills, more projects, and more goals will eventually coalesce into a successful life. But the most powerful tool in the arsenal of the high achiever is not the power to say yes, but the courage to say no. Elimination is a much more potent force for transformation than addition could ever be. It is the act of pruning the dead branches of your ambition so that the core of your purpose can finally receive the nutrients it needs to flourish. To reach the next level, you will have to undergo a radical simplification of your internal and external world. You will have to look at your list of dreams and decide which ones you are willing to let die so that one of them may truly live. This process is painful because it feels like a loss, a narrowing of your future, but it is actually the moment your future finally becomes real. You are stepping out of the fog of could be and into the clarity of will be. The discomfort you feel at the thought of letting go of your secondary goals is the price of admission for the life you actually want. If you continue to carry everything, you will eventually collapse under the weight of it all, achieving nothing and disappointing everyone, most of all yourself. But if you can find the strength to choose, to focus, and to eliminate the noise, you will find that a single goal pursued with total intensity has more power than 1,000 goals pursued with half a heart. The journey toward mastery begins with a single, brutal act of subtraction. Are you ready to stop being busy and start being effective? The answer lies in what you are willing to give up. True power begins at the moment of decision, a singular point in time where the noise of 1,000 possibilities is silenced by the weight of a single commitment. When you finally choose one direction, you are not losing the world, you are gaining the ability to actually move within it. This act of selection provides an immediate psychological relief, a shedding of the cognitive burden that comes with perpetual indecision. Clarity is the ultimate antidote to the modern epidemic of stress, replacing the frantic energy of the scattered mind with the calm, predatory focus of the hunter. By narrowing your gaze to one specific horizon, you eliminate the friction of choice and the paralysis of analysis that keeps the majority of people anchored in mediocrity. This is the strategic advantage that most overlook. Execution speed is not a result of moving faster, but of having fewer obstacles in your path. When your identity is no longer fragmented across 10 different versions of who you might become, it begins to harden into a singular, resilient force. You stop asking who you are and start proving what you can do. This shift in perspective is the foundation of identity strength, creating a sense of internal alignment that makes you virtually unstoppable in your chosen field. The world rewards those who have the courage to be certain in an uncertain age. Choosing one path is the most radical act of self-care you can perform, as it protects your most valuable resource, your mental energy, from being leaked into the void of what if. Once the decision is made, the universe stops being a series of distractions and starts being a series of milestones. This is the moment your life transitions from a collection of random sketches into a coherent and powerful masterpiece of intent. The historical record of human achievement is not a story of those who did the most, but of those who committed the earliest and stayed the longest in a single direction. Success is a compounding interest game, and you cannot compound your results if you are constantly withdrawing your investment to start a new venture. While others are busy sampling the appetizers of life, the master is already deep into the main course, building a level of expertise that the dilettante cannot even perceive. This commitment creates a barrier to entry that protects your position. You win not because the work is easy, but because you have stayed in the arena long enough to master its nuances. The brain is a biological engine designed for deep adaptation, but this process requires a stable environment to function at its peak. When you remain in one context, your neural pathways for that specific skill begin to thicken and fire with greater efficiency, a phenomenon known as myelination. This is the physiological basis of genius. If you are constantly shifting gears, you are essentially short-circuiting this growth, forcing your mind to stay in a state of perpetual remedial learning. True mastery is the result of staying in the fire long enough to be forged into something new. The individuals we admire most in history were often perceived as narrow or even obsessive by their peers, yet it was that very obsession that allowed them to pierce the veil of the ordinary. They understood that the price of greatness is the sacrifice of variety. By choosing one mountain and refusing to descend until the summit was reached, they achieved a level of dominance that makes the jack of all trades look like a ghost in his own life. You must realize that your time is finite, and every hour spent on a secondary goal is an hour stolen from your ultimate legacy. Momentum is a physical law that applies to the human spirit with the same cold precision it applies to a rolling stone. It is only created when energy is directed along a single vector without interruption or division. When you push in one direction with everything you have, the initial resistance eventually gives way to a terrifyingly beautiful speed. Tasks that once felt like impossible boulders become effortless as the weight of your previous work begins to pull you forward. This is the state of flow that all high achievers crave, yet it is mathematically impossible to achieve if your energy is split across multiple objectives. Divided energy creates a series of small, insignificant ripples that never become a wave. Focused energy creates a tsunami that can reshape the landscape of your industry. You must learn to value the momentum of the single path more than the novelty of the new start. This requires a shift in how you measure success, moving away from the quantity of things you are working on, toward the depth of the progress you are making. The feeling of being unstoppable is not a lucky accident, it is the inevitable result of a focused life. When you stop leaking power through the cracks of distraction, you will find that you have more than enough strength to break through any barrier. The most dangerous trap is the belief that you can maintain your speed while taking a detour. Every detour, no matter how small, resets your momentum to zero. You must protect your vector with a level of ferocity that borders on the sacred. This means saying no to opportunities that look like progress but are actually just diversions in disguise. The power of the singular focus is that it turns you into a specialized force of nature, a needle that can find a thread regardless of how much hay is in the way. Once you feel the true heat of momentum, you will never want to return to the cold, scattered life of the amateur. The greatest hurdle to choosing one direction is not a lack of opportunity, but the profound emotional discomfort that comes with narrowing your choices. We are biologically wired to fear the loss of options, a primal instinct that once ensured our survival but now ensures our stagnation. Narrowing your focus feels like a form of death. It is the death of all the other versions of you that could have existed. This is why most people avoid the decision, clinging to their jack of all trades label as a way to stay safe from the possibility of total failure in one domain. They choose the comfort of 1,000 open doors over the challenge of walking through one. But you must understand that an open door you never walk through is just a wall with a different name. The discomfort of commitment is the birth pang of your true self. It is a necessary friction that refines your character and tests the validity of your desires. Most people will live and die in the hallway of life, terrified that choosing one room means missing out on the party in the next. What they fail to realize is that the only people actually having the party are the ones who picked a room and stayed there. You must be willing to endure the initial claustrophobia of the narrow path. It feels limiting at first because you are shedding the excess weight of your indecision, but this limitation is what creates the pressure necessary for a breakthrough. The most beautiful diamonds are created under extreme pressure in very narrow spaces. Your potential is no different. If you refuse to be squeezed, you will remain as coal. Embracing the discomfort of choice is the ultimate sign of maturity and the first real step toward a life of consequence. You must lean into the fear of missing out and realize that the only thing you are truly missing out on is your own greatness. The narrow path is not a prison, it is a launch pad, but you have to be willing to strap yourself in and leave the ground behind. Strategic advantage comes to those who realize that the world is built by specialists and managed by generalists who wish they were specialists. When you become the undisputed master of one specific domain, you become a singular point of value in the global marketplace. You no longer have to compete on price or effort because you are competing on unique capability. This is the ultimate form of career and personal insurance. While the jack of all trades is the first to be replaced by automation or a cheaper alternative, the master is the one who designs the systems that everyone else follows. By choosing one direction, you are positioning yourself at the top of a hierarchy of competence where the rewards are disproportionately high. This is the winner-take-all reality of the modern economy. The top 1% of any field earns more than the bottom 50% combined, and the only way to reach that top tier is through the ruthless elimination of the non-essential. This is a grounded, strategic reality that ignores the feel-good myths of the hobbyist. If you want to change the world, or even just change your own life, you have to stop being a part of everything and start being the heart of something. This clarity allows you to build a reputation that precedes you, a brand that stands for excellence rather than just activity. People will seek you out because they know exactly what you provide, and because they know you provide it better than anyone else on the planet. This level of authority cannot be faked, and it cannot be achieved through a broad, shallow approach. It is the result of thousands of hours of invisible labor directed at a single point. You are currently a blunt instrument, hitting the world with 1,000 soft blows that leave no mark. It is time to sharpen yourself into a blade that can cut through the noise and leave a permanent scar of excellence on the fabric of reality. The clock is ticking with a cold, mechanical indifference to your hesitation. Every day you spend without a clear direction is a day you are actively choosing to remain average. There is a profound urgency to this moment because the window of opportunity for mastery is not open forever. Your cognitive peak, your physical energy, and your time are all depleting assets. You do not have the luxury of another year of exploring your options, while your potential withers on the vine of indecision. The most successful people on earth are not the smartest or the luckiest. They are simply the ones who decided what they were going to do and started doing it while everyone else was still making a list. You must feel the weight of this urgency in your bones. The world is moving faster than ever, and the gap between the masters and the amateurs is widening every single second. If you do not choose your direction now, the world will choose one for you, and you likely won't like the result. You will be assigned a role in someone else's vision, a cog in a machine you didn't build, all because you were too afraid to claim your own path. This is the moment to stop being a spectator in your own life. Make the decision. Choose the one thing that sets your soul on fire, or even just the one thing that you are willing to suffer for, and commit to it with a ferocity that terrifies the people around you. Let go of the need to be liked by everyone and the desire to be good at everything. Become the master of your own domain. The path is clear, the stakes are ultimate, and the time is now. You are standing at the edge of the rest of your life. Will you continue to circle the edge, or will you have the courage to dive in and finally see how deep you can go? The choice is the only thing that matters, and the choice is yours to make today. Stop waiting for a sign. You are the sign. Commit, focus, and let the transformation begin. Mastery is often mistakenly viewed as a mysterious gift bestowed upon a chosen few at birth, but the reality is far more clinical and accessible. It is the architectural byproduct of sustained attention. When you strip away the romanticism of genius, you find a foundation built entirely on the ruthless prioritization of a single skill over 1,000 competing interests. Focus is not merely a tool for productivity, it is the fundamental requirement for the biological and psychological transformation of ability into expertise. In this chapter, we explore how the deliberate narrowing of your world allows for an expansion of your capability that is otherwise impossible. Every time you return to the same problem, the same instrument, or the same craft, you are not just repeating a motion, you are deepening a groove in the very fabric of your being. This depth is what separates the person who knows a thing from the person who embodies it. Modern society encourages a horizontal life, where we skim the surface of many oceans, but mastery requires a vertical descent into the depths of one. This descent is where the pressure of repetition begins to transmute the raw material of your effort into the hardened steel of true competence. By refusing to look away, you force your mind to engage with the nuances and subtleties that the distracted learner will never even perceive. You begin to see the invisible patterns and the hidden connections that only reveal themselves after the first 100 hours of focused silence. This is the foundation of real skill mastery, the understanding that your potential is a direct function of your focus, and that by choosing to look at one thing, you are finally giving yourself the permission to become excellent. The transformation from average ability to true expertise is governed by the laws of repetition and time investment, specifically within the context of deliberate practice. It is not enough to simply show up. You must show up with a singular intent that does not waver when the initial excitement of the new endeavor fades. Each hour of focused work acts as a brick in a monumental structure that will eventually define your life's work. While the scattered learner spends their energy building the first floor of a dozen different buildings, the focused individual is already reaching for the clouds with a single skyscraper. This accumulation of effort is not linear but compounding in nature. In the early stages, progress may feel slow and the rewards may seem invisible, but beneath the surface, a profound reorganization of your internal resources is taking place. You are training your nervous system to handle higher levels of complexity and to operate with a precision that seems like magic to the uninitiated. This process cannot be rushed, and it certainly cannot be shared among multiple competing goals. The time you invest in one direction creates a gravity that pulls in more success, more understanding, and more opportunity. It is the steady drip of water that eventually carves through the hardest stone, not through force, but through persistence. Expertise is the result of staying in the room when everyone else has left to find something more entertaining. It is the quiet, repetitive labor of the master who understands that the 1,000th time they perform a task is the one where the true learning actually begins. By dedicating yourself to one path, you are choosing to participate in the most powerful growth engine known to man, the compounding effect of focused consistency. Neuroscience provides a striking validation of why focus is the primary driver of mastery, centering on the way our brains physically adapt to sustained attention. When you focus intensely on a specific task, your brain triggers the production of myelin, a fatty tissue that wraps around the neural pathways involved in that activity. This insulation makes the neural signals travel faster and more efficiently, effectively turning a dirt road into a high-speed fiber optic cable. The more you focus, the thicker this insulation becomes, and the more effortless the skill feels. However, this biological upgrade requires a high degree of specificity. The brain cannot effectively myelinate pathways for 5 different skills simultaneously. When you jump between tasks, you are essentially trying to build infrastructure that never quite cures, leaving your mental roads in a state of permanent repair. Scattered learners may feel like they are gaining knowledge, but they are building weak, uninsulated circuits that are prone to interference and rapid decay. Focused individuals, on the other hand, build neural pathways that are resilient, powerful, and permanent. This is why the master can perform under pressure while the amateur chokes. The master is relying on a physical structure that has been hardened by years of singular focus. Attention is the trigger for this neuroplasticity. Without the heat of sustained concentration, the brain sees no reason to invest the energy required to upgrade its hardware. By providing that heat through one clear direction, you are literally re-engineering your brain for greatness. You are not just learning a skill, you are physically becoming the skill, creating a biological advantage that no amount of multitasking or superficial variety can ever replicate. The presence of distraction is not just a minor annoyance in the pursuit of mastery, it is a structural hazard that destroys the possibility of depth and leaves you stranded in a world of surface-level understanding. When your attention is divided, you are unable to reach the psychological state known as deep work, where the most significant breakthroughs and exponential improvements occur. Deep work is the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task, and it is the only environment where true mastery can be forged. Every time you check a notification, answer an irrelevant email, or let your mind wander to a secondary goal, you incur a cognitive switching cost that can take up to 20 minutes to recover from. This means that if you are distracted every 15 minutes, you are literally never operating at your full potential. You are perpetually stuck in the shallow end of the pool, performing tasks that are easy to replicate and of low value to the world. Multitasking is the enemy of depth because it forces you to remain at the level of the obvious, preventing you from seeing the intricate details that define high-level performance. The master understands that to go deep, one must close the door to the world. They recognize that the ability to concentrate is a muscle that must be trained and protected. In a world that is designed to fragment your attention, the choice to focus is a strategic maneuver that places you ahead of 99% of the population. While others are busy being busy, the focused individual is busy becoming better. By eliminating the noise, you allow your mind to penetrate the core of your craft, uncovering insights and efficiencies that are invisible to the distracted eye. Depth is where the value lies, and depth is only accessible through the narrow gate of absolute focus. The difference between linear progress and exponential growth lies in the way you manage your mental energy over long periods of time. Multitasking and scattered goals lead to a flat progress curve. The difference between linear progress and exponential growth lies in the way you manage your mental energy over long periods of time. Multitasking and scattered goals lead to a flat progress curve because you are never staying in one domain long enough to reach the tipping point where growth explodes. You are essentially spending all your energy on the steep learning curve at the beginning of every project, only to quit and move on just as the path starts to level out and the real gains begin. Exponential improvement, the hallmark of the master, occurs after the initial struggle, when the foundations are so secure that every new piece of information integrates instantly with what you already know. This is the stage where you begin to innovate, where your intuition takes over, and where you start to solve problems that others don't even know exist. This level of performance is only possible if you have invested the time to move past the surface levels of a skill. The focused person understands that the real fun begins after the first 1,000 hours, when the struggle of the beginner is replaced by the flow of the expert. Each day of singular focus adds a layer of sophistication to your work that cannot be bought or faked. It is the difference between a sketch and a finished painting. One shows potential, but the other shows mastery. When you commit to one direction, you are signing up for the exponential part of the curve, the part where you stop working for the skill and the skill starts working for you. This is the secret of the elite. They didn't work harder than you, they just worked on one thing longer than you did. Ultimately, we must accept the simple, logical conclusion that mastery is nothing more than focus repeated over time. It is the result of 1,000 small decisions to stay on the path when the siren song of variety calls out to you. There is no magic formula, no hidden secret, and no shortcut that can replace the requirement of sustained attention. Every person you admire for their skill is simply a person who was willing to be bored, willing to be narrow, and willing to be focused longer than anyone else. This realization is both grounding and incredibly inspiring, as it puts the power of mastery back into your own hands. You do not need to wait for inspiration or for the perfect circumstances, you only need to choose your direction and begin the process of repetition. The journey toward expertise is a marathon of focus, a test of your ability to keep the main thing in a world that wants you to do everything at once. As you close this chapter, let the logic of this reality settle into your mind. Your ability to master your life is directly proportional to your ability to master your attention. If you can control where you look, you can control what you become. The compounding effect of your consistency will eventually create a result that looks like genius to the outside world, but to you, it will simply be the inevitable outcome of your choices. You have the intellect and the energy, now you must provide the focus. The path to greatness is not a wide road filled with many options, but a narrow trail that requires you to leave everything else behind. Mastery is waiting for you at the end of that trail, but it demands your undivided spirit. Choose your one thing, give it your absolute attention, and watch as the world transforms around your newfound expertise. Focus is the foundation, and time is the architect. Build something that lasts. The act of switching paths is often romanticized as a pursuit of growth or a quest for new horizons, but beneath the surface of every pivot lies a devastating psychological and temporal tax that most people never fully calculate. Every time you abandon a goal to start something new, you are not just changing direction, you are effectively incinerating the momentum you worked so hard to build. This is the hidden tragedy of the modern dilettante, the constant resetting of progress loops that ensures you remain forever in the remedial phase of existence. We fail to see that starting over is an expensive luxury that drains our most finite resource, time. When you jump from one career to another or from one skill set to a completely different domain, you are forced to rebuild your foundations from the ground up. You underestimate the sheer volume of hours lost in the friction of relearning basic principles, establishing new networks, and recalibrating your mental models to fit a different landscape. This cycle creates a life lived in the shallows, where you are always a beginner and never a master. We tell ourselves that our diverse experiences are building a unique perspective, but in reality, we are often just running away from the discomfort of the plateau. The cost of this avoidance is a systematic dilution of your potential, leaving you with a collection of half-built bridges that lead to nowhere. You are paying for your curiosity with your legacy, trading the deep satisfaction of achievement for the cheap dopamine of a fresh start. This chapter is a mirror held up to the exhausting reality of the pivot, revealing that the grass is rarely greener on the other side, it is simply unmowed. Until you recognize the true price of your indecision, you will continue to spend your life at the starting line, watching as the world passes you by. The emotional consequences of chronic switching are as corrosive as they are invisible, slowly eating away at the core of your self-trust and identity clarity. Each time you walk away from a project before it is finished, you send a silent message to your subconscious that you are a person who does not follow through. This leads to a persistent, gnawing sense of self-doubt that colors every future endeavor, making it harder to commit when the work inevitably becomes difficult. You lose the ability to distinguish between a genuine change of heart and a tactical retreat from the fear of failure. This fragmentation of identity is a profound psychological burden. You become a ghost haunting multiple versions of a life you never quite inhabited. The frustration of being pretty good at many things but indispensable in none creates a unique kind of mid-career burnout, where the lack of depth leaves you feeling unanchored and vulnerable. You see your peers who chose a single path ascending to heights of authority and influence while you are still trying to figure out which ladder to lean against. This comparison breeds a quiet resentment, not toward others, but toward the version of yourself that refused to choose. The constant switching creates a mental fog where your various skills and goals compete for dominance, leaving you without a clear narrative for your life's work. You are essentially a stranger to yourself, defined by what you have left behind rather than what you have built. The emotional toll of this stagnation is a debt that eventually comes due, manifest in a profound sense of wasted potential that no amount of novelty can soothe. You must realize that the feeling of excitement at a new beginning is often just a mask for the terror of being judged on your ultimate effort in the pursuit of a single, meaningful goal. Most people are trapped in a sophisticated illusion of progress, mistaking the frantic activity of switching for the steady movement of advancement. Because you are busy learning new terms, meeting new people, and setting up new systems, your brain rewards you with a false sense of accomplishment. You feel like you are moving forward because the scenery is changing, but in reality, you are just moving in a tight circle. This is the trap of horizontal growth. It provides the sensation of movement without the reality of elevation. You are accumulating a vast library of introductory knowledge that is essentially worthless in a world that demands specialized expertise. True stagnation is often disguised as a busy calendar. While you are occupied with the how-to of your fifth new hobby or third career change, you are missing the profound breakthroughs that only occur at the intersection of persistence and time. This produces a life of surface-level competence that is easily disrupted by the slightest shift in the economy or the environment. You are creating a resume of starts, failing to realize that the market only pays for finishes. This illusion is dangerous because it allows you to justify your lack of results as a byproduct of your diverse interests rather than a failure of focus. You are effectively running a race where you return to the starting blocks every 10 miles, marveling at how much ground you have covered while never actually reaching the finish line. The psychological comfort of being a jack of all trades is a sedative that keeps you from noticing that you are slowly drowning in a sea of mediocrity. You must break the spell of the new and recognize that the only progress that matters is the kind that builds upon itself. Anything else is just a sophisticated way of staying exactly where you are while sweating. The opportunity cost of not sticking with a single path long enough is a number so large that most people would find it paralyzing to truly contemplate. When you abandon a trajectory, you are not just losing the time you spent, you are losing the exponential rewards that were waiting for you just past the next plateau. Success is a compounding game, and the greatest gains are always backloaded, occurring in the final stages of a long-term commitment. By switching paths, you are effectively cutting off the tail end of your growth curve, ensuring that you never experience the phase where your effort is amplified by your reputation, your intuition, and your established systems. You are trading a future of mastery for a present of variety, unaware that the variety you crave is actually the primary obstacle to the freedom you seek. The master is the one who can command their own time and set their own price, while the dilettante is always at the mercy of the next learning curve. This cost extends beyond finances and into the realm of social and intellectual capital. You lose the deep relationships and the institutional knowledge that can only be forged over years of shared struggle in a single domain. Every time you pivot, you reset your social status back to zero, losing the trust and authority you worked so hard to establish. The hidden cost of switching is the life you could have had, the depth of understanding, the scale of impact, and the peace of mind that comes with knowing exactly who you are and what you are for. We underestimate the power of the boring middle years of a career, where the real work of compounding takes place. By fleeing the boredom, you are forfeiting the brilliance. You are paying a premium for the right to be a beginner, and the price is your ultimate potential. It is time to stop calculating what you might gain and start calculating what you are guaranteed to lose. Restarting repeatedly destroys the very mechanism of momentum that makes high-level achievement possible. Momentum is not just about speed, it is about the accumulation of small wins that create an unstoppable force of nature. When you stay on one path, your past efforts serve as a tailwind, making each subsequent task easier and more effective. When you switch, you are stepping out of that tailwind and into a headwind of unfamiliarity and resistance. This constant battle against the initial friction of a new endeavor is exhausting and unsustainable. Most people burn out not because the work is hard, but because they are always doing the hardest part of the work over and over again. They never reach the point where the momentum takes over and the results begin to feel effortless. This destruction of momentum is a systemic failure of strategy. It is like trying to launch a rocket by firing the first stage for 10 seconds, turning it off, and then starting a different rocket from the ground. You will never reach orbit this way, regardless of how many rockets you build. The psychological toll of this constant struggle is a profound sense of fatigue that makes you more susceptible to further distractions. You begin to believe that success is just a matter of luck because you have never stayed long enough to see the predictable results of sustained effort. The only way to win is to stop restarting. You must protect your momentum with a level of ferocity that borders on the obsessive, recognizing that any pause or pivot is a threat to your ultimate survival in your chosen field. The ability to stay the course when the wind dies down is what separates the elite from the average. If you cannot master the art of staying, you will never master anything else. Your life will be a series of discarded prototypes, a museum of what could have been, that offers no warmth and no shelter. In the final analysis, consistency is not just a high-level strategy for success, it is a fundamental form of survival advantage in an increasingly volatile world. Those who can maintain a single direction for decades develop a level of resilience and specialized knowledge that makes them virtually anti-fragile. While the world is constantly chasing the latest trend or the newest platform, the consistent individual is building a fortress of competence that is immune to the whims of the market. This survival advantage is rooted in the fact that mastery creates its own demand. When you are the best at what you do, you are never obsolete. Switching paths, by contrast, makes you a commodity, someone who can be easily replaced by anyone else with a few months of training. In a world of infinite distraction, the person who can focus is the one who holds the keys to the future. Consistency allows you to navigate the inevitable storms of life with a sense of purpose that the distracted person can never know. It provides a stable framework for your decisions and a clear metric for your progress. You must view your commitment to your path as a life vest, something that keeps you afloat when the waves of change threaten to pull you under. The cost of switching is the loss of this stability, leaving you adrift in a sea of endless possibilities but no actual destinations. As you move forward, let the harsh reality of these hidden costs serve as a warning. The next time you feel the urge to pivot, remember the price you have already paid for your previous starts. Ask yourself if you are willing to reset your life once again, or if you are finally ready to do the one thing that truly leads to greatness: stay. Survival belongs to the persistent, and mastery belongs to the focused. Stop paying the tax of indecision and start investing in the power of the long game. This is the only way to transform from a jack of all trades into a master of your own destiny. Talent is a seductive lie that often serves as the greatest obstacle to true greatness. While the world worships the natural, the gifted, and the prodigy, the reality of high-level achievement tells a much different and more brutal story. Natural talent is merely a head start in a race that lasts a lifetime. It provides an early advantage that is almost always squandered without the hardening force of discipline. In this final exploration, we must confront the truth that being born with a gift is often a curse in disguise, as it breeds a dangerous reliance on ease. The talented individual often avoids the grueling repetition required for mastery because they have never had to struggle to be good. But being good is the enemy of being great. Discipline is the equalizer that turns the average into the exceptional through the sheer force of will. It is the ability to show up when the passion has evaporated and the applause has died down. When you apply discipline to one focused direction, you are not just practicing a skill, you are building a fortress of competence that no amount of raw talent can ever tear down. Talent is a spark, but discipline is the fuel that keeps the fire burning through the coldest nights of the journey. To win the long game, you must stop looking for shortcuts and start looking for the work that everyone else is trying to avoid. Mastery is not about how you start, it is about how you sustain yourself when the path becomes steep and the air becomes thin. In a battle between a gifted amateur and a disciplined worker, the worker wins every single time because they have been forged in the fire of persistence while the amateur was merely playing with the flames. The primary reason talent fails so frequently is that it lacks the structural integrity provided by consistency and resilience. Most talented people are used to winning early without much effort, which leaves them psychologically fragile when they finally hit the inevitable plateau of advanced skill. When the work stops being easy, the talented often stop working, moving on to the next thing where they can feel superior again. This is the cycle of the gifted jack of all trades. In contrast, the disciplined individual understands that progress is a game of accumulation. They do not rely on flashes of insight, they rely on the compounding power of the daily grind. They know that 100 mediocre days of focused practice are worth more than one day of brilliant performance followed by a week of silence. Consistency is the process of laying one brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid every single day. Over time, while the talented person is still looking for a new hobby, the disciplined person has built a cathedral. This accumulation of effort creates a depth of understanding that is impossible to replicate through short bursts of energy. Resilience is the secondary component of this dominance. It is the refusal to let a bad day turn into a bad week. Discipline treats failure as data, while talent treats failure as a threat to its identity. By focusing on one game, the disciplined person removes the option of retreat. They stay in the room until the problem is solved, and in doing so, they develop a level of grit that makes them effectively invincible. You do not need to be the smartest person in the room, you simply need to be the one who is still there when everyone else has gone home. Psychologically, discipline is significantly harder to maintain than talent because it requires a constant confrontation with our own limitations and boredom. It is emotionally draining to repeat the same scales, the same drills, and the same processes for years on end without the immediate gratification of a new discovery. This is why most people opt for the scattered life of the jack of all trades. Variety is an emotional anesthetic for a lack of purpose. Discipline demands that you sit with the discomfort of being average for a long time before you are allowed to be elite. It requires the suppression of the ego and the rejection of the shiny object syndrome that plagues our modern culture. However, this emotional hardship is exactly what makes discipline strategically superior. Because it is hard, very few people will do it. Talent is a lottery, but discipline is a choice, and that choice creates a massive competitive advantage in a world of distraction. When you choose to be disciplined in one direction, you are entering an arena where most of your competition will disqualify themselves through their own lack of focus. The strategic superiority of discipline lies in its predictability. You can plan for it, you can measure it, and you can rely on it when your motivation fails. Talent is a fair-weather friend that disappears when the pressure is highest, but discipline is a silent partner that carries you through the storm. It is the internal architecture of the winner. While others are waiting for inspiration to strike, you are already halfway to the finish line because you had the courage to be bored and the strength to stay the course. This is the truth that the elite understand: the hardest path is almost always the only one worth walking to the very end. The failure of the talented is often a silent tragedy of missed potential, fueled by a lack of the persistence required to cross the threshold of mastery. We see these individuals everywhere: the brilliant minds who never wrote the book, the gifted athletes who never won the championship, and the visionary entrepreneurs who never launched the business. They were too fast to learn and too slow to commit. On the other hand, the history of achievement is filled with individuals who were told they lacked the natural ability but who succeeded through the relentless application of effort in one single direction. These are the survivors of the long game. They understood that the world does not pay for potential, it only pays for results. Persistence is the bridge between the two. By narrowing their focus, they were able to channel their limited energy into a laser beam that eventually burned through the toughest obstacles. This is the power of the singular path. When you refuse to divide your attention, you become a specialized force that grows stronger with every passing year. The talented person is like a flood, immense, powerful, but ultimately shallow and temporary. The disciplined person is like a river, steady, focused, and capable of carving a canyon through solid rock over time. Success is not a matter of being the best at everything. It is a matter of being the best at the one thing that matters. This requires a level of persistence that talent simply cannot sustain without a foundation of discipline. You must be willing to be the tortoise in a world full of hares who are constantly falling asleep on the job. The finish line does not care how fast you ran the first mile, it only cares that you had the discipline to finish the race. One focused and disciplined path will always beat 1,000 scattered talents because the depth of one creates a gravity that the breadth of many can never achieve. When you commit to a single game, you are not just learning a skill, you are building an ecosystem of success. You develop a reputation, an intuition, and a network that are all aligned with your ultimate objective. This alignment creates a synergy where every action you take reinforces every other action. The jack of all trades, despite their various talents, remains a collection of unrelated parts. They have no center of gravity, which means they are easily pulled off course by the latest trend or the newest challenge. They are a jack of all trades but a master of none because they lack the central axis of discipline. Discipline is the thread that binds your efforts together into a coherent whole. It turns your life into a singular, powerful narrative instead of a series of disconnected short stories. This focused approach allows you to achieve a level of dominance that makes you indispensable. In a world of generalists who are struggling to find their place, the disciplined specialist is a lighthouse of certainty. You win the game by refusing to play any other game but your own. This is the ultimate motivational truth. You have enough energy to be the best in the world at one thing, but you do not have enough energy to be mediocre at everything. By choosing the narrow path of discipline, you are claiming your greatness. You are deciding that your life will not be a footnote in the history of others, but a headline in your own. The power of the one is greater than the noise of the many, and it is discipline that unlocks that power for the few who are brave enough to choose it. As we reach the conclusion of this journey, the message is clear and undeniable: your focus is your future. You have seen the hidden costs of switching, the illusion of the modern polymath, and the structural failure of the scattered mind. You now know that mastery is simply focus repeated over time and that discipline will always outperform talent in the long run. The time for exploration is over, and the time for execution has begun. You must now take the hard, uncomfortable step of choosing your direction and letting go of everything else. This is not a loss of freedom, it is the beginning of your true liberation. You are being called to rise above the noise of the jack of all trades myth and enter the silent, powerful ranks of the masters. The world is waiting for your contribution, but it is not interested in your shallow variety. It wants your depth, your expertise, and your undivided attention. Make the decision today to commit to your one thing with a ferocity that leaves no room for doubt. Embrace the boredom, lean into the repetition, and trust in the compounding power of your consistency. The path to the top is narrow, but the view is worth the sacrifice. You are no longer a victim of distraction, you are an architect of mastery. Take your one clear direction and walk it until you reach the horizon of your potential. Stop trying to do it all and start doing the one thing that will define your legacy. The game of life is won by those who stay in the game until they own it. Your game starts now. Be disciplined, be focused, and become the master you were always meant to be. The narrow path is open, and it is waiting for you to take the first, most important step of your life. Choose. Focus. Dominate. The true test of the master is not found in the initial burst of inspiration, but in the long, silent corridor of the middle miles where effort seems to vanish into a void of indifference. This is the period of invisible progress, a grueling phase where you are working harder than ever before, yet the world offers no applause and your mirror reflects no change. Most people are biologically and psychologically wired to seek immediate feedback, and when the results do not mirror the exertion, they conclude that the path is a dead end. They quit just as the foundations are being finalized, unaware that the structure of their success was only moments away from breaking the surface of the earth. This chapter is dedicated to that miraculous inflection point where the weight of your consistency finally overcomes the inertia of your circumstances. It is the moment when the water finally boils, not because the heat increased, but because it was maintained. You must understand that the work you do in the dark is precisely what creates the brilliance of the light. The breaking point is not a stroke of luck. It is a mechanical inevitability for those who refuse to flinch. We have been conditioned to fear the plateau, yet the plateau is where the most profound internal restructuring occurs. Your skills are coalescing, your intuition is sharpening, and your neural pathways are hardening into permanent infrastructure. The frustration you feel is not a sign of failure, but the pressure of your potential trying to find an exit. Those who reach this stage are the ones who have mastered the art of delayed gratification, understanding that the greatest rewards are always reserved for those who can endure the silence. It is a sacred threshold that separates the visionary from the dreamer, requiring a level of faith that borders on the irrational until the very second it becomes reality. Compounding skill growth is a law of nature that remains hidden from the distracted mind because it requires a singular vector to manifest its true power. In the beginning, your progress is linear and painstakingly slow, as each new piece of information feels isolated and heavy. But as you stay the course, a strange and beautiful phenomenon begins to occur. Your existing knowledge starts to act as a magnet for new insights. The connections between ideas become faster, your execution becomes more fluid, and the effort required to achieve a result begins to decrease even as the quality of that result skyrockets. This is the acceleration phase of the breaking point. It is the moment when the snowball you have been pushing up the hill finally crests the ridge and begins its thunderous descent, growing larger and faster with every rotation. Most people never see this because they are too busy starting new snowballs at the bottom of different hills. They fail to realize that the first 90% of the effort often yields only 10% of the results, while the final 10% of effort yields the remaining 90%. This disproportionate return on investment is the secret of the elite. When you reach this stage, the world suddenly perceives you as an overnight success, unaware of the years of repetitive, boring, and singular focus that made the breakthrough possible. You are now operating on a level of efficiency that the amateur cannot even comprehend, turning what was once a struggle into a graceful dance of competence. The compounding effect is the ultimate reward for your refusal to diversify, proving that depth is the only true shortcut to the top. By staying in the game, you have earned the right to experience the exponential, transforming your steady labor into an unstoppable force of nature. The psychological shift that accompanies this breaking point is nothing short of a total internal revolution, as the weight of your effort finally transforms into the lightness of genuine competence. For years, you have operated on a foundation of discipline and raw willpower, forcing yourself to show up even when you felt like an imposter in your own craft. But suddenly, the friction begins to dissolve. You no longer have to remind yourself how to perform, The skill has moved from your conscious mind into your very bones. This transition creates a profound sense of confidence that is entirely different from the shallow bravado of the beginner. It is a quiet, unshakable certainty that comes from having survived the fire and emerged as something stronger. You begin to trust your own instincts because they have been validated by the reality of your results. This is the moment when the emotional labor of the journey starts to pay dividends, replacing the anxiety of the "what if" with the clarity of the "I am." You are no longer chasing mastery, you are inhabiting it. This shift in identity is the most valuable asset you will ever possess, as it changes the way you interact with the world and the challenges it presents. You move with a different posture, speak with a different tone, and see opportunities where others only see obstacles. The breaking point is where you finally stop trying to prove yourself to the world and start expressing yourself through your excellence. It is the psychological liberation that comes from knowing you have finally paid the price of admission and that the stage now belongs to you. This confidence is the fuel for the next level of your growth, providing the mental stability necessary to handle the increased stakes and the larger scale of your impact. You have crossed the valley of shadows and reached the sunlit peaks of your own potential. This specific threshold of visible results is the ultimate filter of human ambition, the definitive line in the sand that separates the masters from the rest of the world. Those who constantly restart are perpetually trapped in the pre-breaking point phase, living in a state of chronic frustration and unfulfilled potential. They have felt the heat of the fire many times, but they have never stayed long enough to be forged. They are the ones who will tell you that the path is too hard or that the rewards are a myth, unaware that they were only inches away from the treasure they sought. The successful individual, however, is the one who recognized the breaking point for what it was, a test of character disguised as a lack of progress. They understood that the emotional intensity of the struggle was a necessary part of the transformation, a pruning process that removed the non-essential parts of their ambition. By reaching this stage, you have proven that you possess a quality that is rarer than talent and more valuable than intelligence, the ability to endure. This persistence is what creates the legacy. While others are busy seeking the next shiny object, you are reaping the harvest of the seeds you planted in the cold, lonely seasons of your journey. The breaking point is not just a personal achievement, it is a strategic victory over the common human tendency toward distraction. It marks the moment when you cease to be a consumer of possibilities and become a creator of realities. You have demonstrated a level of grit that commands respect and a level of focus that demands attention. The world has no choice but to recognize you now, not because you are lucky, but because you are undeniable. You have stayed at the table until the cards finally turned in your favor, and you have the chips to prove it. You are no longer one of many, you are the one who didn't quit. The emotional intensity of this phase is a direct reflection of the depth of the sacrifice you have made to reach it. There is a profound beauty in the delayed reward system, a richness that the instant gratification culture can never understand. When you finally see the fruit of your labor after years of invisible toil, the satisfaction is not just professional, it is spiritual. It is the validation of your soul's ability to commit to a vision and see it through to completion. This realization brings with it a surge of motivation that is far more sustainable than the fleeting excitement of a new start. It is a deep, resonant joy that comes from the alignment of your actions with your highest purpose. You feel a sense of harmony with the process itself, recognizing that the struggle was not an obstacle to your success, but the very substance of it. The persistence that felt like a burden for so long now feels like your greatest superpower. You look back at the moments you almost gave up, the late nights, the moments of self-doubt, the quiet frustration of being misunderstood, and you realize that every single one of those moments was a deposit in the bank of your mastery. The emotional intensity of the breaking point is the interest you are finally collecting on those deposits. It is a powerful reminder that nothing of true value is ever created overnight and that the things we have to wait for are the only things that truly change us. You are being rewarded not just for your skill, but for your patience, your trust, and your refusal to settle for a life of surface-level variety. This emotional payoff is the ultimate fuel for the future, providing you with the resilience to face even greater challenges with a smile. You have learned the most important lesson of the human experience, that the darkness of the seed's journey through the soil is the only way to reach the glory of the flower. The final realization of this journey is the understanding that patience is not a passive waiting, but an active, aggressive trust in the integrity of the process. You have learned that the world is governed by laws of cause and effect that cannot be cheated or hurried. If you provide the focus, the discipline, and the time, the results will follow as surely as the dawn follows the night. This breaking point has taught you that the primary obstacle to your greatness was never your lack of talent or opportunity, but your own inability to be still and stay the course. Now that you have the final realization of this journey is the understanding that patience is not a passive waiting, but an active, aggressive trust in the integrity of the process. You have learned that the world is governed by laws of cause and effect that cannot be cheated or hurried. If you provide the focus, the discipline, and the time, the results will follow as surely as the dawn follows the night. This breaking point has taught you that the primary obstacle to your greatness was never your lack of talent or opportunity, but your own inability to be still and stay the course. Now that you have seen the results of your singular focus, you can never go back to the scattered life of the amateur. You have tasted the power of depth, and everything else now seems hollow in comparison. This trust in the process is the ultimate form of wisdom, a grounded and empowering perspective that allows you to move through life with a sense of peace and purpose. You no longer need to worry about what everyone else is doing or how fast they are moving, because you know the secret of the long game. You know that while the world is racing in 1,000 directions, the person who walks a single path with absolute intent will eventually pass them all. The breaking point was not the end of your work, but the beginning of your true influence. We have arrived at the ultimate truth of the human experience, a reality that remains hidden behind the flashy curtain of modern distraction. Mastery is not found in the search for the new, but in the relentless perfection of the old. As we conclude this journey, we must strip away the final illusion that variety is the spice of success. In the realm of greatness, variety is a toxin that dilutes your power and scatters your legacy. True mastery is the byproduct of repetition, a sacred loop of action that refines the spirit and hardens the intellect. It is the 1,000th time you perform a task, long after the dopamine of novelty has evaporated, that the real alchemy begins. We live in a world that sells us the lie that we should always be pivoting, always exploring, and always adding to our repertoire, but the most impactful individuals in history were those who had the courage to be boring. They understood that excellence is not a destination you reach by wandering through 1,000 different forests, but a cathedral you build by laying the same stones with increasing precision for decades. This final chapter is a call to return to the core, to embrace the quiet beauty of the repetitive grind, and to recognize that your potential is not a function of how many things you can do, but how deeply you can do one thing. The brilliance you seek is buried beneath the surface of the mundane. It is found in the drills, the basics, and the fundamental movements that the amateur discards as soon as they become difficult. By choosing repetition over variety, you are choosing depth over surface, and impact over activity. You are deciding that your life will not be a collection of shallow puddles, but a singular, deep well that provides life to everything it touches. The path is simple, but its simplicity is what makes it so rare and so incredibly powerful in an age of chaos. The great tragedy of the modern striver is the confusion of excitement with progress, a psychological trap that keeps millions of talented people in a state of perpetual stagnation. We have been conditioned to believe that if we aren't feeling a rush of adrenaline or the spark of something new, we aren't growing. In reality, the opposite is often true. Real progress is slow, quiet, and frequently repetitive. It is the steady, rhythmic pulse of a heart committed to a single cause. When you chase excitement, you are merely chasing a chemical reaction in your brain, one that is designed to fade the moment the novelty wears off. This is why the jack of all trades is always moving. They are addicted to the start but terrified of the middle. Excellence, however, is forged in that middle. It is created in the hours where nothing seems to happen, yet everything is changing. Repetition is the mechanism that moves a skill from your conscious effort into your subconscious intuition. It is how the master makes the impossible look effortless. While the world is distracted by the latest trend, the master is in the shadows, repeating the same fundamental moves until they are perfect. This dedication to the boring is what creates the extraordinary. You must learn to love the plateau, to find peace in the repetition, and to value the steady accumulation of competence over the fleeting high of a new beginning. Progress is measured by the depth of your roots, not the variety of your branches. When you stop seeking the next shiny object and start seeking the next level of depth in your current path, you finally unlock the door to true dominance. The world does not reward the person who has tried everything, it rewards the person who has mastered the one thing that others found too repetitive to endure. It is time to stop running and start digging, for the treasure you seek is exactly where you are standing. Throughout this book, we have explored the high cost of switching, the myth of the polymath, and the strategic power of focus, but all these lessons converge into a single realization: depth always beats breadth in the long run. The person who knows a little bit about everything is at the mercy of the person who knows everything about one thing. In a global economy and a digital landscape, general competence is a commodity that is easily replaced, but mastery is a monopoly that commands its own price. By choosing a single path and staying consistent, you are creating a competitive advantage that is impossible to replicate. You are building a reservoir of specialized knowledge, a network of deep connections, and a reputation for excellence that will carry you through any storm. This is the ultimate form of personal and professional security. While others are spread thin and vulnerable to the slightest change in the environment, you are anchored by the weight of your expertise. The compounding effect of your singular focus will eventually produce results that look like magic to those who are still jumping between goals. They will call you lucky or gifted, but you will know the truth: you simply stayed in the room longer than they did. You were willing to do the boring work while they were seeking the fun work. You were willing to be narrow while they were trying to be broad. This final lesson is the most empowering of all because it puts the control back in your hands. You do not need more talent, more money, or more opportunities. You only need the discipline to choose and the persistence to stay. Depth is the only thing that creates lasting value, and depth is only accessible through the doorway of sustained repetition. As you look toward the future, let the clarity of this truth guide your every move. The narrow path is not a limitation of your freedom, but the ultimate expression of it. Choosing one path and staying consistent is the ultimate advantage in life because it aligns your internal energy with the external laws of achievement. When you are no longer fighting yourself, when you are no longer debating which version of you should show up today, you become a singular, focused force of nature. This alignment reduces your stress, increases your speed, and creates a sense of purpose that is undeniable to everyone you meet. You stop being a passenger in the collective madness of the modern age and start becoming the architect of your own destiny. The consistency you bring to your craft is a signal to the world that you are a person of substance, a person who can be trusted with the most significant challenges and the greatest rewards. This is how legacies are built. They are not built through a series of unrelated events, but through a continuous narrative of focused intent. Every day that you stay on your path, you are adding another sentence to that story, making it more powerful and more permanent. The jack of all trades leaves behind a cluttered attic of unfinished ideas, but the master leaves behind a monument that stands for generations. You must decide today what you want your life to represent. Do you want to be a footnote in 1,000 different stories, or the protagonist of your own great epic? The choice is made through your daily actions, through the things you choose to ignore as much as the things you choose to do. Consistency is the highest form of self-respect. It is the refusal to let your potential be wasted on trivialities. It is the commitment to honor the gift of your life by seeing how far you can take it in one direction. By staying the course, you are proving that you have the character to handle the greatness that is waiting for you at the end of the road. As we bring this audiobook to a close, let the noise of the world fade away until only the sound of your own conviction remains. You now possess the blueprint for a life of extraordinary impact, a map that leads away from the shallow waters of mediocrity and toward the deep ocean of mastery. The discomfort you feel at the thought of letting go of your secondary goals is the sound of your old self dying to make room for the person you were always meant to become. Do not fear the narrowing of your path, embrace it. Within that narrow space lies the pressure that will forge you into a diamond. You are standing at the threshold of a new existence, one defined by clarity, discipline, and the profound peace of knowing exactly who you are and where you are going. The world will try to pull you back into the chaos, offering you shiny distractions and easy shortcuts, but you now know better. You know that the only way to the top is through the relentless repetition of excellence. You know that your attention is your most sacred asset and that your focus is your greatest weapon. Take this realization and turn it into action. Choose your one direction, commit to it with every fiber of your being, and do not look back. The journey will be long, and parts of it will be boring, but the destination is a life that few will ever experience. You are no longer a jack of all trades, wandering aimlessly through the possibilities of others. You are a master in the making, walking the path of the elite with steady, purposeful steps. The time for talking is over, the time for mastery is here. Trust in the process, believe in your focus, and let the repetition begin. Your legacy is waiting for you at the end of this one single path. Let this final moment be the one where the search ends and the mastery begins. There is a profound sense of relief that comes with finally admitting that you cannot, and should not, do it all. By letting go of the 1,000 things that do not matter, you are finally giving yourself the permission to excel at the one thing that does. This is the ultimate act of courage in a world that profits from your distraction. You are reclaiming your mind, your time, and your future. As the narration fades, carry with you the weight of this conviction: you are enough, your path is enough, and your focus will be your salvation. The greatness you have been seeking in a dozen different directions has been waiting for you in the center of your own attention all along. You do not need to look further, you only need to look deeper. The clarity you feel right now is not a fleeting emotion, but a structural change in your understanding of reality. You have seen through the myth of the jack of all trades and found the truth of the master. Now, go and live it. Let every day be a testament to your commitment, every action a brick in your cathedral, and every repetition a step closer to the summit. The world will watch in awe as you achieve what others only dream of, and they will wonder what your secret is. You will know that the secret was simply the courage to choose one thing and the discipline to never stop. Your story is no longer a collection of fragments, it is a powerful, singular masterpiece of intent. This is the end of the explanation and the beginning of your dominance. The path is yours, the focus is yours, and the mastery is inevitable if you simply refuse to quit. Step forward into the silence of your own excellence and let the work speak for itself. You are the master of your own destiny. Go forth and create the life that only you can build.